the author of Trumped Up: How Criminalization of Political Differences Endangers Democracy. Harvard constitutional law professor Alan Dershowitz, Fox News contributor Sara Carter, Judicial Watch president Tom Fitton. Sara, because you have been on the forefront this week, we now know that the dossier, bought and paid for by Hillary with salacious lies, was used to get a FISA warrant against...
Well, yes, we now know that it was either in part used or it was a significant part of the FBI being able to get the warrant to spy on Trump and people within his campaign. But, Sean, when you're looking at the dossier, and I think actually leaking Glenn Simpson's testimony actually backfired on the Democrats. I mean, it really did. You look at that testimony, you see to yourself, first, Glenn Simpson said there was a source inside the Trump campaign. That's proven to be false. Now, what people have corrected that version of it and said, well, no, he was just talking about George Papadopoulos in London. Then you find out that Glenn Simpson wouldn't answer any questions as to whether he was pushing this dossier to the media. He kept stepping back. He wouldn't answer it. Then we find out he didn't even verify the information in the dossier. And when you look at all of this, knowing that the Hillary Clinton campaign and the DNC actually paid for this dossier, and that the dossier itself could have been part of a ginormous, a huge disinformation came by the Russians. I mean, it's clearly there's a problem.
Professor, let me go to you. You make some really good points as it relates to the partisan aspect of all this. Now, I'm a conservative. I'm a proud conservative. I don't hide any of that. But we learned a lot that the fix was in. I want to use this analogy, that the fix was in. Poor Bernie Sanders and his supporters, they had no shot at all whatsoever. And even Donna Brazile admits that. Then you have Comey and Strzok. I don't believe I've ever heard of a case where you write exoneration letters months before you interview the people involved in an investigation. They didn't do the investigation, but they're writing an exoneration. And then it seems with the Russian dossier that they're trying to put the fix in there by using bought and paid for Russian propaganda, we now learn. And then you take it a step further, and that information was put before a FISA court and a warrant issued. As a constitutional scholar, I hope you are as afraid as I am about these issues, about the corrupt nature of all of this and our constitutional rights in jeopardy here.
I am very much worried about that. That's why I called for, right from the beginning, an impartial, nonpartisan commission of inquiry to look into every aspect of the last election, every aspect. What the Russians try to do in terms of the Democrats, what the Russians try to do in terms of the Republicans. This is a bipartisan issue. Every American suffers when the Russians in any way try to influence the election. Look, I don't think the Russians try to influence the election necessarily in favor of one candidate or the other. I think they try to influence the election in terms of destabilizing the American political system. And that's why having partisan inquiries by congressional committees doesn't work. That's why having a special counsel who operates behind closed doors doesn't work. We need an open investigation commission. This is too important to all Americans to leave to any kind of partisan advantage.
Let me follow up with the dossier. It was partisan, bought and paid for. Remember, Christopher Steele didn't come on board with Fusion until Hillary and the DNC were paying for it. But that dossier used to obtain, at least in part, maybe significantly, as Sarah's reporting, to get a FISA warrant on a opposition candidate and a president-elect. Seems like a Fourth Amendment crisis here in many ways.
Well, I think it would be a Fourth Amendment violation if the material in the FISA warrant were known to be false. Now, under a case called Franks versus Maryland, it's not enough under the Fourth Amendment for it to be wrong. It has to be known to be wrong. And so, again, this should be looked into. Every fact should be investigated. Nobody should be afraid of the truth. Let the truth come out. Let the American public then decide. But can I say one more thing? I have to tell you just one more thing. I know it's not on topic, but, you know, as the grandchild of American immigrants who came from a very, very poor country in Europe, I hope the president will apologize for whatever he said that demeans immigrants, the Statue of Liberty says, give us your poor, your hungry, people yearning to be free. We are a country of immigrants, and I just hope we can elevate the discussion about immigration and try not to insult people from any part of the world. And the president can do a great service if he just comes forward and says,
he did admit today that he used tough language. But he denied what Durbin, we're going to get into this later in the show, but he denied what Durbin said. Sonny Perdue and another senator in the room said they didn't hear it, but doesn't mean it wasn't said. We're going to get to that.
Much matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't much matter what words he used. I think the thrust was a thrust against certain countries, and we just can't have that kind of attitude. It makes us look very bad in the world, and it really undercuts what our Statue of Liberty has long stood for.
Sarah, I am, before I get to Tom, I'm not trying to keep you out of your Tom, but I want to just follow up on something that Professor Dershowitz was saying. I have one source, I don't have two, that actually told me that there was one confirmation as it relates to the dossier, and I was given a name, and it happens to be somebody that is a corrupt individual inside the Clinton circles, and you know, I can tell by your face, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
I know exactly who you're talking about, and if that does come to fruition, if we find out,
then the court may have been lied to.
Then the court may have been lied to, and then what Alan Dershowitz said would definitely take significance.
Agreed. Tom, tell us what Judicial Watch is doing.
Well, you know, I think there's going to be, as Sarah's indicating, a tsunami of information coming out on all of these scandals. We have the court ruling that the Clinton emails need to be released more quickly. So we're going to get all these Clinton emails that she tried to hide or delete.
These were the ones deleted, and we haven't seen any of them yet.
Yeah, that looks like they may all
probably
be
about
new.
yoga, wedding, and funeral, and
or as we found
emailing Bill, who doesn't email.
Or we found on the Wiener laptop classified information and pay to play, which I guarantee is going to be coming out. And then we had the court just yesterday talk about how he wants the Comey memos because he wants to review the Comey memos, which are the genesis of the Mueller operation. There would be no Mueller special prosecutor but for the leaking of Comey to the New York Times on one specific memo. So that material may be coming out. It's all building, and there are text messages that are coming out. And as Ed's talking about, now we're going to find out more details about the FISA or the intelligence surveillance abuses. Now, you know, my concern is that why are we waiting to find out about them after the reauthorization occurs? I would suggest we find out about the abuses before they reauthorize this for another 6 years.
Well, this is such a good point because Devin Nunes, well, you know, I'll let you report on this, but...
Well, yeah, no, I mean, of course, yeah, Devin Nunes is going to, after they rule on the FISA Act, which probably is going to pass, is going to disclose what actually these extensive abuses...
Extensive abuse.
Yeah, in the Department of Justice and with the FBI. And I got to tell you this is coming from people within the intelligence community. This system has been abused. It has been abused viciously. And we know from what we've seen, right? We know from what we've seen that there needs to be an investigation. But let's do it before. Let's do it.
Let me quote for the professor. Professor Dershowitz, what Devin Nunes is saying, that there is clear evidence of massive abuse of government surveillance by the FBI and Department of Justice officials. I'm a civil libertarian first and foremost, sir.
Yeah. We civil libertarians, liberals and conservatives alike, have long worried about the FBI, its surveillance methods, and the potential for abuse. Remember, Comey not only leaked, he laundered the information through a Columbia law professor. He didn't have the courage to stand up in front of a TV camera and say, this is information that I'm going to give you because I want a special counsel to be appointed. He laundered it through a Columbia professor. These are issues that should be investigated. We have to know what surveillance is being used against Americans, and whether you're a conservative or a liberal, or a Republican or a Democrat, you should care deeply about any abuse of this process.
If you believe in the Constitution and our constitutional rights, nobody should disagree with that. Last word, Tom.
Hillary Clinton and her top campaign aides need to be brought in, at least by Congress, to testify about what they knew and when about this dossier. Glenn Simpson refused to talk about whether the Clinton campaign, his paymaster, what their involvement was in directing Chris Steele's use of Russian intelligence to gather information.
A lot of news coming next week?
Oh, a lot of news coming next week, Sean.
A lot.